Hello, this is Mark Van Gelder of SubvertGov. Today I want to talk about an article that I saw on my one of my friends' Facebook feed. You got a pimple right there. I tend to accumulate pimples like right here and right here. That's the only place I ever get pimples, but I tend to accumulate them right there. Um, I also got scrapes from work, and I got another one right there on my finger. But like what can you do? I guess I could wear gloves at work, but sometimes I just don't. So today is my, I guess you could say it's my Utah Pride. I guess my Utah Pride video. Today I've got my Utah Jazz shirt on. I'm not really a fan of the Utah Jazz, but this is a shirt that I got at Savers for $1, and because it's their old logo. And whatever. I guess if I really followed basketball, which I don't, if I really did, and I had to pick a team that I would support, it would be the Utah Jazz, just because it's sort of the team that I grew up with, being born and raised in a suburb of Salt Lake City. I'm also drinking Provo Girl Pilsner, referencing the pretty much dry city of Provo, really hardcore Mormon city. It's made by Squatters, an excellent brewery in Utah, one of the first, and yeah, I really like all their beers. They got Full Suspension Pale Ale, they got First Amendment Lager. And their little tagline for First Amendment Lager is, give me liberty or give me a cold one. And they have a famous story where they went out to the Great Salt Lake and they dumped beer into the, like as like the Tea Party, sort of thing. They dumped beer into the Great Salt Lake, to protest the state's control over alcohol. So long story short, it's pretty awesome, the story behind this particular brewery. Of course, being all beers from Utah, they are 4% alcohol by volume. So you really can't get much more than that unless you go to the liquor store, and then you can find your regular full potency beers. But it's a really good beer. I like it. But back onto the story that I was talking about at the beginning of this video. This is an article from USA Today. It says, the article is "A Revolution in the Works." So it said, like basically the subtext is, so it says, but if there's an upside to the increasing unhappiness that most Americans feel towards the political class, it's that maybe it means people are paying closer attention. And I would agree, people are paying closer attention. I have noticed this not only in the last couple of years at work, from my coworkers that have spent basically their whole time like just not caring about the political system. But let me read you excerpts of the articles. It says Americans are out of sorts and increasingly they're unhappy with the government. According to a Pew poll, with a link, released this last week, more than half of Americans view government as a threat to their freedom. How awesome is that? Like now over half of Americans think that there's a real serious problem, and the government is actually the problem, not the solution to a lot of these issues, because they're concerned about government being a threat, quote unquote, a threat to their freedom. It says, and it continues, and it's not just Republicans unhappy with Obama or gun owners afraid that government will take their guns. 38% of Democrats, that's almost half of Democrats, and 45% of non-gun owners see the government as a threat. It says, add to this another recent poll, which only 22% of likely voters feel that America's government has the consent of the governed. It says, and you've got a pretty depressing picture and a recipe for potential trouble. Governments operate to a degree by force. Well, they operate entirely by force, but we're not going to really get into that today. says, but ultimately they depend on legitimacy. A government that a majority views as a threat and that only a small minority sees as enjoying the consent of the governed is a government with legitimacy problems. And in that case, I would agree. You know, if people don't agree with their government, then they don't think that the government supports them or supports the people that the government supposedly protects. There is a real problem with the government. It says, this is a science fiction writer Jerry Purnell wrote in 2008. We've always known that eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. It's worse now because capture of government is so much more important than it once was. There was a time when there was enough freedom that it hardly mattered which brand of crooks ran government. That has not been true for a long time, not during most of your lifetimes, and for much of mine, and it will probably never be true again. That's a very poignant quote. You know, like Ron Paul actually, in his, I believe it's in Liberty Defined, if I remember right, he talks about how the way to eliminate, you know, government corruption or government corruption and the government being bought out by different companies, and you know, the way to really fix campaign finance is to make government to the point where it doesn't make sense or where it's not financially advantageous to fund them with millions and millions of dollars, because there's no way that the government does, or the government wouldn't have the power to do things that promote, you know, that these companies that are paying for them, the government doesn't have the capability of giving them their return on an investment. So there would be no point in investing in them, in candidates. It says that captures an important point. The more powerful the government becomes, the more people are willing to do in order to seize the prize, and the more afraid they become when someone else has control. So it was after the 2004 election when liberals talked revolution. And so again, after 2012, when secession petitions flooded the White House. There are two possible ways to address this problem. One is to elect people that everyone trusts. The problem with that is that there aren't any politicians that everyone trusts. And alas, if there were, the odds are good that such trust would turn out to be misplaced. I agree. You know, like when Obama was you know, the candidate in 2008, I supported him. I said, you know, like, listen, the words that he says are things that I actually believed in, to a degree, but he was certainly better than Bush. Now I'm having serious reservations about that claim, because I believe now that Obama is actually worse than Bush, because Obama, through his co-opting of the liberal movement, all of these anti-war Democrats that hated Obama are now totally in the tank, or sorry, all these liberals that hated Bush are now totally in the tank for Obama, and they're willing to accept whatever they want or whatever Obama wants to do, which ends up being a lot worse than what Bush was doing. So it then discusses further, talking about the possibilities of what could happen. It says, in my constitutional law class the other day, most of my students took the position that they would be unlikely to see a constitutional convention in their lifetimes. I'm not so sure. Last year I spoke at a Harvard Law School conference on holding a new constitutional convention, one which had participants from all sorts of ideological positions ranging from the Tea Party to Occupy Wall Street movement, and people got along surprisingly well. And I would agree with that, because from my experience with both the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street, not having been really an active participant in both, but in observing and you know, thinking about these movements, there really is a lot more in common than there is in difference. You know, Occupy Wall Street has really no central ideology. I mean, they have this whole thing. Basically, it's against Wall Street. And they say that Wall Street has way too much power in government. And the Tea Party movement is about saying that government itself is too big. And so you have these two sort of groups together that have the one unifying sort of idea. And that one unifying idea is that corporations have way too much control of politics. And that's on both sides. But because one is considered conservative and one's considered liberal, they tend to hate each other for reasons that I'll never really understand. Um, so it talks about how, it says in the American system, a constitutional convention, which has never been held since the Constitution was adopted, is the last stop before revolution. It is intended as a way to get people to end run the political establishment. If enough states request a convention, Congress has no choice but to call it, and the resulting proposals go straight to the states for ratification, bypassing Congress. It's a way to make drastic changes when the political class has blocked similar ones. It further states, are we there yet? I don't think so, but we're getting closer all the time. Political class, take note. This article really surprised me. It really surprised me that the newspaper USA Today would actually author something like this. Of course, the author was Glenn Harlan Reynolds, who's a professor of law at University of Tennessee. He blogs at instapundit.com. But long story short, I am extremely surprised to see a mainstream news organization even talk about the possibility of revolution. Let alone discuss polls that are politically inconvenient to the elites. And it's very heartening to see. I think that this is long overdue. I was really excited to see it. I want to thank my friend. I'm going to leave him nameless, but I want to thank my friend who shared that with me, and I appreciate it. For time, Squatters, great brewery, Utah Jazz, Utah here, Utah everywhere. Thanks again. Bye.